What an incredible film. Really excited to continue this conversation. So joining us to share more about this journey, please welcome journalist and director of Muscogee Media, Angel Ellis, and co-directors of this film, Rebecca Landsberry-Baker and Joe Peeler. Here to lead the conversation, we have Atlantic staff writer Shirley Li. Thank you so much.
So please start thinking of what you might want to ask these three. But I'm going to start with you, Angel. I'm going to blow up your spot a little bit. Backstage, I was watching you watch yourself, and you did tell me that you've only seen the film all the way through twice. Is that right? So what's running through your mind when you watch yourself in some of the most intense scenes?
Oh my gosh, it's like takes you right back. It's so very. There's parts of it that make me feel that knot in my stomach again. There's parts where I feel that just, ugh, God, can this be over feeling? Staring off in the distance, waiting for the votes to come in. It's very transportive for me, and it's very affirming in a lot of ways, because sometimes I see myself on the screen, and for the first time I go, damn, badass. And I don't think I'd ever thought that about myself until I got to see it like that. And so it's been really good.
Yeah, well, so... Oh, sorry.
That was our whole goal, just to make Angel look like a badass the entire time.
Check. Make Angel go, damn.
Yeah, man.
Rebecca, this is your first ever documentary. And prior to your life as a filmmaker, you worked at Muscogee News, when it was still Muscogee News Network. So you knew Angel, you were the vice president of the Muscogee Media editorial board. I'd love to know, why did you want to tell this story in this format and tell the story of your former workplace, as it were?
Absolutely. So in addition to those two roles, I'm currently the executive director of what's now the Indigenous Journalists Association. And so Free Press in Indian Country is one of the very unique issues that we work on, and we've been a nonprofit for 40 years. And so obviously, this issue is just so unique to what Indigenous journalists face, and I've seen tribal governments squash free press efforts, and you think like the journalists are the ones that have the power to tell this story. Well, it's not always true in Indian country, as you can see. So I wanted to make sure, when I saw that the repeal was happening and it dissolved the editorial board, I thought, like, this is an opportunity for me to step in. And I don't know if there's anything I can change, but what I can do is document and share the story with the world, because it's so important, and I have to know, how did this happen? Why did it happen? And I just felt like that huge responsibility to tell that. And my husband, who's also a producer on the project, we came and we pitched Joe, and we were like, Joe, as a documentary filmmaker who gets lots of pitches, like, is this something that actually could be a documentary? And so I was very grateful that he wanted to sign on, because I think we couldn't have told this story without each other. Definitely two parts of a whole as co-directors. But again, it's just so important for me to make sure that this story was not lost in our community, and that the journalists had an opportunity to share what was happening to them in this really important moment for my tribe.
Yeah, Joe, I'd love to hear the other side of that conversation, or just a little bit more about it. When Rebecca did pitch it to you, you as the only person on this panel without journalistic experience, as I understand it.
Yeah, no, you're right.
How did you conceptualize the structure of this film and what you really wanted to highlight, and this fly-on-the-wall take?
Well, it's funny because this is truly honest, and it sounds like a joke, but the Atlantic played into my thinking. Because when, obviously, Becca and Angel have lived this. Becca used to be an editor at the Tribe. We've watched Angel live it in the film, and I had no idea. When Becca and Garrett, our producer, and Becca's husband came to me, and my producing partner, Conrad, I just thought, I have a subscription to the Atlantic. How do I not know about this? Like, I've never heard about these challenges to free press in Indian country. I listen to NPR. I kind of like fashioned myself as this like kind of engaged political citizen. And my initial thought was, well, if I don't have any idea that this is happening, then I think a lot of other people might not have any idea that this is happening. And I think like when the form, I mean, look, we edited for nearly 3 years. And so like the form of the film took a lot of, it was a long and winding road to get to where we're at. But I think meeting Angel for the first time was when it clicked over from this, it could be an interesting, textbook. You could write something very dry about the legislative and congressional and all of these battles that are happening in Indian country. And meeting Angel, it turns into this thing where it's like, oh, if there's one person who's going to fight this fight, it's going to be Angel, and you kind of know that immediately. And that gave us our guiding light in the film. It's follow Angel. She's going to fight, like, let's see what happens kind of thing. And that really became the anchor through which we like used to guide the film, really.
I would love to. I mean, I'm one of those people who had no idea about any of this going into the film. So I'd love to know from the two of you, especially you, Rebecca, who did you envision as the audience, and how did you ensure that the film wasn't didactic to Native audiences who knew this was already an issue, while also still being illuminating for the rest of us who had not been paying attention?
Yeah, I think for this story, having been in a newsroom, like being with journalists, like humor is such an important like tool for diffusing the stress of the day, and that's definitely no different in Indigenous communities, and I think even more so. And so, like Joe is saying, like it could be a very like heavy, story about free press and transparency and elections, and we have all those elements. But also, I wanted to make sure that like people know that Indigenous communities, we're not a monolith, and there's such a richness of diversity in our communities, and we're just modern people, being and working in the newsroom and telling jokes and just trying to survive day by day when the crazy things get, thrown at us, and we have to like use that as a survival mechanism, really. Humor is just so important to our communities. So I think, being able to show that, like we're just normal people living our lives and dealing with the stressful situations, like that was very important to me to show. We don't all look the same, we don't all talk the same, we're not in the same places across North America, and so like all of those things like played into like wanting to really provide a really nuanced perspective of what modern Indigenous storytelling could look like. And so that was one of my goals in coming from the world of journalism and being new as a storyteller under that umbrella coming into documentary. So I feel like we did a good job, hopefully, of capturing so many different Indigenous people and representing them well.
Angel?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go for it.
I feel like the humor wouldn't have really, if we hadn't approached it with that, to bring that authentic humor, it just wouldn't have hit with our audience, like our Native audience.
Yes.
Because we use that as a form of power. It's an exchange of power. It's a recapturing, reclaiming of the power to laugh at a situation, brings it inside of you and lets you see that you're still bigger, stronger than these problems. And so when you laugh at that, it's just that physical expression of the power that you take in and bring it back into your world.
Yeah, rather than just giving people a Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
you've got actual voices. Angel, being one of those voices, I'd love to know, when Rebecca approached you, you had been colleagues in the past, what was your initial reaction to that, and how did your expectations for your experience as a source with the camera on you compare to the actual experience?
Oh my God, to become the source, to become essentially the whistleblower was a scary new place for me. I mean, I've done attributed work, and I'm like a real stickler for attribution. I'm about telling the story and removing myself from it, and then I just captured this whole center kind of like fugal point of view to the story. And for me, it was a little tricky, but the first time I saw a camera scared the shit out of me, I'm telling you. I mean, I was just oh, what am I doing? But that's also my protection. It's my shield, and I have to become real intimate with it real fast because it's going to cover me in the shit storm that I'm going into. And then I realized it was the first time at first Joe came with the camera all by himself, and he would sit there and ask me a question, and his eyes would get so big, and I would be like, this is the first time anyone's heard me. And that, I'm telling you, that combined with going to Nausea Conference and connecting to my peers who were supporting me in a big, big way, lit my hair on fire, and I was like gonna do it no matter what. Hell or high water, I was convinced. At times they were going to be recording me being thrown out, put in handcuffs, whatever, but I didn't care because it would be the truth and people would finally see it, and that would make a difference happen. Even if we didn't win, we didn't get what we want, at least somebody knew. And I was genuine to what I felt for the first time. And that was very powerful. To self-actualize my own ambitions and goals was just incredible.
Yeah. I mean, a spotlight can be so intimidating, but at the same time, it's a platform, and you really used it. On the flip side, Rebecca and Joe, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about gaining and maintaining, maybe not, the trust of some of the tribal leaders you ended up speaking with. What was your pitch like to them, and how did you gain their trust? And if they pulled away, what would you do?
I would say just broadly in Native communities, trust is not something that's given out quickly. And even as Becca being like a former employee of Muscogee Media, it took us about 6 months for Jared to open up and start talking to us. Jared, of course, is our favorite hoverboard keyboardist in Muscogee Media. And so we would go out, and whether they were, I think, politicians or otherwise, there were times where we would have 3 or 4 or 5 conversations with somebody before we would even be able to roll the camera. And that would be a trip, you're right. And so we'd do a trip, and then we'd see them the next month, and the next month, and the next month, and then finally do that. And there were plenty of people in the film where we would talk to somebody, and then they would kind of give us the stamp of approval. And then they would say, you know who you should talk to is my cousin. And then we would go film them, and then they're the cousins in the movie, not the original subject, right? But we also ran into plenty of flack from tribal politicians as well.
Yeah, and I think in Indian country too, I always like to say it's not impossible to like be from outside of the community and to, tell really great stories about the community you're reporting on. But it takes a lot of time, to build that rapport. Just in any, good coverage of a community, there's so many nuances to capture, and I think everyone was hesitant, as they should be if people are poking around with the camera. But also, again, it was a big election year in 2019, and so I think the politicians couldn't avoid us asking the same questions that the citizens were asking at the time, because they were demanding what happened to free press? You need to answer this. And so I think there was to some extent, they couldn't really avoid us, but then also they probably thought like, this is gonna just, die. Who knows if anyone's going to watch this documentary? Okay, sure, we'll talk to you. So luckily that didn't happen, but I do think there was probably like, some sense of like, well, we don't know where this is going to end up, and it'll probably be after the election anyway. But funnily enough, that we ended up, screening right now, doing our festival run in the middle of another chief election year this year in 2023. So it's been very interesting to screen for the first time on the reservation and to hear, feedback. And so Chief Hill and Second Chief Beaver actually came to one of our screenings in Tulsa there on the reservation. And so just like, any relationship with politicians, it does take time and trust to like build that. And I think there was genuinely, trust that we had to build, and, we had to split up the team. There was 10 candidates, so we kind of had to like narrow down who and how we like spent our time with them as far as the candidates go. But yeah, it just lots of time to build those relationships.
Yeah, you filmed.
Parachute into Indian country.
Not at all.
Not possible.
Yeah.
You filmed for 3 years, and that's hours and hours of footage. Angel, before we head to audience questions, I would love an update. What is the future of Muscogee Media, and how has perhaps this film, have you noticed a shift in your readership's perspectives?
Oh my gosh, this is my favorite question to answer. We just completed elections. Last week, our election results were confirmed. It's the first time since 2017 we haven't had a contested election at the Muscogee Nation. And I'm like, this is what the power of press can do. When the when the people are civically engaged and they have exactly what they need, they don't feel threatened or fearful of the system. We didn't have to bring the Carter Center in. We had a very successful election, and people felt that they were heard. And it was calm. It was kind of boring. But that's a wonderful thing, because the stress melted away and people asked questions. We did really hard stories leading up to it. There was accusations of fraud, and there was accusations of not completing the audits properly. We had those leaked from certain offices. We have our very first anonymous source who is actually still working in the government and leaking us. We have this wonderful relationship with those people, and they know that we work for them, and they're filling up our phone lines with tips and our emails, and this is what it's all about. This is storytelling, and we're genuinely in service to people, so it's a totally different ball game. And when I go into meetings, they ask me what I want and what I need, and I'm like, here it is. And I'm treated much differently. I'm not thrown out. It's impacting our community in a very good way.
On that note, On that note, we're going to open this up to audience questions. So please raise your hands. A mic will come to you. I see one in the back, over that way. Please stand up. There you go. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
I was curious, how often are documentaries filmed for 3 years when you don't know where the story is going to go? And how much power, Angel, did it give you to have that camera with you? Because I'm sure you were searching for strength.
Yeah, that was really hard.
You want to take the first part?
Yeah, the short answer is you have to be insane.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. There were many times where, you know, the one that comes to mind is when the constitutional amendment was voted down the first time, where Angel and I were out in the parking lot, like, we don't know what kind of movie we're making here. Like, is this going to be a positive ending or a bad ending? Like, what's going to happen here? I think that's the kind of like pro and con at the same time of being a completely independent production, is that nobody's breathing down your neck to tell you exactly what's going to happen at the end of the film, but you have to just believe that whatever your footage you're capturing is going to ultimately like lead to something that's coherent, and just have that faith no matter what happens. And that was not always easy.
I really thought that, like, at some point they would just be like, this is where we have to end it. And then things would just keep developing. And there's just a ripeness to stories sometimes. When a story wants to be told, hang on, come hell or high water, it's going to come out. And that's kind of how I felt it happened for me, for sure, because I would reach my wit's end every single barrier, and I would go, all right, that's it, you know. But then something would come along, a person would come along, and they would say something, they would speak life into me, and it would just refuel that fire. And you would know that instead of capturing a happy ending, at least you were planting seeds, and they were going to grow some way. And whether or not we told the happy ending, or 10 years later someone else got to have a happy culmination of policy that worked, at least it started somewhere. And that was just a huge motivating factor for me to keep going when it was real crappy.
Anybody else have any questions? Let's go here in the front. Sorry.
Hi.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
So Angel, I just want to say thank you also for the work you do, because it's so extremely badass, in case you didn't already know that. Thank you. I loved how you all told this story totally independent of the timeline of the the non-tribal USA elections in 2020, but there were a couple times in the timeline where I was like, wait, is this a sci-fi movie coming to tell me about the impending apocalypse? It felt like it was speaking so directly to that while telling your own story. So now that this part has wrapped and you are looking forward to this bright, boring future of local democracy, do you have any advice for people sitting in this room for what can we all do? How can we apply these lessons in the broader United States or in other democracies worldwide who would like to get back to boring elections?
I guess the shortest way to put it for me would be to indigenize your media consumption and really embrace storytelling from an indigenous perspective. Because here's what's happening in the world. Our words are being used as weapons here and there. It's being turned against us. Information's coming from everywhere. So it's because we don't have a relationship with the sources of information. Form a relationship with your local news and make sure that even if you don't like it, you communicate that with them. Here's where we are. We have had our entire industry gutted for the dollar. And that does not get rebuilt overnight. What happens is somebody's going to step up. They're going to try. It's going to be really hard because they don't have the resources. Tell them what you want. Be in constant communication. If you're the journalist, know that this is work that is founded in Anagitchka. It's founded in love. We are basically your grandma, and we run around capturing the photos, and we elevate the consciousness of our community into the overall story. And that's not something that's easy to do, but it takes time to rebuild it. And we have to do it because if they control all the narrative and informations that we have, then we are disconnected and we are not in relationship with the systems that serve us. And if those systems don't serve us, we must tear them down. It's the way it has to be done. And growth is hard, it's painful, but it will come out beautifully in the end. That's what you have to really rely on.
I think we have time for one more. Yes, with the mic, I see.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm from Nigeria, and we've got lots of issues that I feel we need to treat the way this topic has been treated. But my question is for Joe. I suspect you run a business for profit. How were you convinced to spend the time and the resources to do this film, right? Not knowing where it's going to go. And why I asked that question is we might need to make that same case with someone like you.
Sure.
And how do we convince someone like you to invest the time and resources to tell this story over like 3-4 years, not even knowing where it's going to go?
Right. It's kind of the same answer as before. You have to find someone crazy, I think. That's such a good question because there wasn't ever any point, I don't think for the entire team, where we thought, you know what, this is a sure thing, and this is, we're gonna make a bunch of money off of this, or something like that. Like that never kind of worked into the equation. I think we were all just passionate about I would say, the partnership that this film could be, which is both giving a platform to the Native community and really, like, with your perspective brought to the film, making that as kind of true to the experience of Native journalists and Native communities as possible, but also as interesting and as informative to outside audiences as possible. And that's kind of where I came in. And so I think, like, my kind of gut reaction to your question is, like, you have to find a partner and you need to figure out, like, what your story is to go and find that partner. You know what I mean? It's not like Becca came to me with like a pitch deck and like a fully formed pitch, but like that kind of idea of like, this is the story and this is what is happening on the ground, and can we work together to make this something that is good for both the community and for an audience that's kind of broader and wider. But it always happens completely differently. And so I would say the more people you talk to about it, the more of a chance you're going to have to find that person who that kind of unknown thing clicks in and goes, yeah, I think this would be a movie or an article or whatever it ends up being.
Let's squeeze in one last question. I think you had one up front.
Hi. First of all, you all are so cool. I wanted to ask, I know that you're just starting screenings, but I was wondering, so far, has this story influenced other tribal communities?
Yeah, there's a couple of them working on constitutional reforms right now. And it's amazing. And some of them are just like, oh, there's another level of protection we can have. Let's just do it right now. And then some of them are very contentious. There's one at the 3 affiliated tribes, and those are some real bad guys. And the lady who's the journalist working on that is even more badass than I am. People have died in that area for revealing some of the stuff that's been revealed there. And she's advocating hard. So it's happening.
Well, that is all the time we have. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you all for being here. Yes. Thank you. And we are going to exit that way.
We're going that way?
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.